Welcome back to the Big Small Business Show. And today, as I said earlier, we are having a completely legal show. And so in studio with us, we've got Marto. He's director of Marto Lafitte and Associates Incorporated. I love it's like Associates and Incorporated. And we're talking right now about employment contracts. And I see this in businesses that I invest in, where I say, well, where's your employment contract? And they say, but I'm the CEO, I'm the director, I don't need an employment contract. And I say, oh, yes, you do.
Indeed, I think that it's very difficult for people to, especially shareholders that are also employed by the company, to always keep in mind that they wear more than one hat. And in relation to the fact that they are an employee, then that relationship should be governed by an employment contract. It's crucial.
Yeah, so my commentary to them is that you're a shareholder, you're a director, if they are a director, and you're also an employee. And so the big friction, and because this is small businesses watching this, the big friction in that is that, well, I don't want to be governed by how many days leave I have, etc. And I say to them, well, then change it. You don't have to have the standard for yourself. You can change that to whatever you want.
Well, I think my first bit of advice is that it's crucial for businesses to not have a one-size-fits-all agreement. You, at the very least, need to have a different agreement of employment for different classes of employees. You're not going to have your same employment contract for your receptionist as it is for that same director employee of the company. But even within a certain class, for example, you're not going to have the same employment contract for a truck driver within your logistics business as you are going to have in respect of administrative position. There are some provisions that are very specific to each of those positions. And so I think that's one of the mistakes that employers make or entrepreneurs make when they're starting out, that they think that they can have this one template, which they sometimes get off the internet, and then they just utilize this as a stock template for all their employment contracts.
And I see that especially with small businesses where they don't have employment contracts, that they land up in the CCMA often because there's no set agreement and they fall foul of the law. You talk about the specifics there. You still have to you can put specifics, but they still have to be part of the Basic Employment Act, or the
Basic Conditions of Employment Act.
That one, the one where you have to put that thing on the wall.
Yes, correct.
Right. So it still has to comply. You can't make your own, or can you? And maybe there's a question.
So there are most of the provisions of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act you have to adhere to, and you can't contract to the detriment of the employee. You can obviously improve those conditions. You can give employees more leave, but you can't go less than obviously the minimum set by the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And I would say that, probably 70% of the terms and conditions of an employment contract would be incorporated in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. However, what about the rest? Those that are specific to your businesses, things like what is your use of company property policy, your social media policy, retirement age. For example, on retirement age isn't set by the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. Most people don't realize that. And so they have to be then set in your employment contract, if there is one.
And how does the employment contract relate to, let's call it the company policy? So let's say what you wear, like that you're not allowed to wear T-shirts, as an example. Would that be in the employment contract? Would it be in the company HR policy? And how do the two relate, if at all?
So generally, you would have a term in the employment contract that says that you'd have to adhere to the policies of the company. And then you might have a separate policy relating to what you can wear, a separate policy on social media use, a separate policy in relation to various other things. But ultimately, they still form part and parcel of your conditions of employment. You'd still have to adhere to them as an employee.
So what happens now if I join a company? The policy says I can wear T-shirts. And all of a sudden, there's a new CEO comes in and they change the policy. Okay.
Yes.
So what I'm just trying to work out now that I didn't sign up for that.
Yes.
But I'm now bound by that as an employee.
Well, one of the tips I give always is that it's important to have your employment contract at the point in which you appoint the person as part of that negotiation process, so that the employee knows what are the terms prior to signing on the dotted line and agreeing to become an employee. And the reason you want that is exactly to stop that situation, because once the employee is made an employee of the company, then any change that you bring subsequent to the commencement date then is a unilateral change that you're trying to make, and you need the consent of the employee in order to effect that change.
And if they say, no, I'm still going to be in T-shirt?
Well, then you've got a dispute.
Every time I change my policy, I may be in a dispute.
So,
or are there certain types of things that need to change?
I would think that there are certain policies which you probably don't require that level of agreement. So there might be in terms of something minor, but certainly in respect of anything that's material.
Employment contracts also, what I see is often they're not signed by both parties. Okay, and that I see a lot with businesses. It's like, show me your employment contracts, and they show, but it's not unsigned, and therefore it's useless. Is that right?
So, prima facie, yes. So normally if an agreement's not signed, it means that the parties haven't agreed to the terms. You could have a situation, for example, you send the terms and conditions of employment by email to someone before they join the company. They respond and they say, yes, I agree to the terms, and I look forward to starting on the 1st of December. In that instance, you still have some sort of indication in writing that they've agreed to your terms, and therefore to be an argument in respect of that they in fact have concurred. But you don't want to be sitting in a situation arguing, bringing an evidentiary trial in relation to whether you have an agreement or not. The best thing is get it signed.
The 2 or 3 things that will prevent you spending time in the CCMA. What do you make sure you've got in your employment contract?
A couple of tips. So a quick one, have a full job description. Try and have it as detailed as possible. You don't want a situation where the employee says, I didn't sign up for this. So you want to have it and open enough that you can have some degree of flexibility. The second thing is, technology has become a big thing. Social media use, what you can and you can't do. And a lot of employees have been fired for putting up photographs of them having a beer on a Friday afternoon, and you have that whole discussion about private and what's within the scope of your work. Also, in terms of policy on alcohol and drugs, the decisions have come against employers in terms of which, even when an employee has been caught drinking, that if you haven't been able to prove that the drinking has affected the performance of the employee, you still then aren't able to fire that employee. So the best thing always is to have a zero tolerance policy relating to any alcohol or drugs.
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this segment. When we come back, Roy is going to highlight to us the 5 agreements that every startup needs to have in place. Stay tuned.